All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live stream today. This is the seventh entry now in WIRSPA's Icon series. The number keeps getting bigger every time. I'm always surprised we've done this many. But
And more to
as
come.
always, yeah, and more to come. That's true. We'll talk about those at the end, let you know who's coming up. But today, as always, we have your host, WIRSPA Community Envoy Matt Petrick. He is here to talk with a very special guest today, Joy Spence, Master Blender at J Wray Nephew. And Matt's going to give a more extended introduction to Joy in just a moment. Before we jump into that, real quick, I just want to kind of show you your way around here today if it's your first time joining us. On your right, you will see that there is a chat box. So feel free to just say hello, let us know where you're joining us from around the world. I know we always get a really kind of worldwide crowd at these events. So it's cool to see where everyone is joining from. If you have a question for Joy or Matt at any point during the show today, there's a little button at the bottom of the screen that says Ask a Question. So just click that button and type your question in down there. It's always better if you enter it in that area rather than the chat. So Matt will see it. And last but not least, feel free to invite any friends you have who love rum to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But with all that said, Matt, I will turn things over to you.
All right. Thank you, Will. Pleasure to be back yet again. This is becoming a regular occurrence here. This is the seventh edition of our WIRSPA Icon series. For those who are just turning in for the first time, and it seems like there are a few of you. WIRSPA is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. WIRSPA being the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, sort of like the organization that advocates on behalf for the various Caribbean rum making countries like Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana. It's a long history, and for our 50th anniversary, we wanted to go talk to some of the people who've had an enormous impact on Caribbean rum, like Joy Spence, our guest today. So we've been going through people like Evan Brown and Frank Ward and Yasu Persaud and Kamal and other people, Margaret Montplaisir. And we all along, we knew from the very beginning we wanted to have Joy Spence on. So I'm beyond excited that she's joining us today. I first met Joy in 2016, actually, on a WIRSPA trip. It was one of the last authentic Caribbean rum jaunts, and I was with Martin Cate and Peter Holland and Camper and Wayne Curtis, Kate Perry, and I just said, well, we were all gathered around on a hillside overlooking the sugar fields, and we all needed to get our selfie with Joy. So it's I never would have imagined 5 years ago that I'd be here now interviewing Joy for the Icon series. So thank you for joining us today, Joy.
The pleasure is mine, Matt.
Okay. Excellent. So pretty much we all know who you are. You are the master blender for perhaps, or I would say clearly the most famous Jamaican rum brand in the world, and also the longest running. And you are the master blender and have been so for many years. So unlike most of the other interviews you've done, this is not so much about the rums or what's coming out. This is about you. This is about your journey through your career and your time and in the center of one of the most famous rum brands and rum companies in the world. So let's jump into that. So tell us about your early days. Like what were you doing before you came to J Wray Nephew, and sort of what prepared you for that?
Well, funnily, when I left high school to go to university, I actually wanted to become a medical doctor. But then I realized I just couldn't handle trauma. So I said, no, that was not for me. So I continued studying straight chemistry. And then when I graduated, I started to teach chemistry, eventually lecturing at the university in chemistry.
And this was in Jamaica, I assume.
In Jamaica.
Right.
And I decided while lecturing that I also wanted to further my education. So I took up an OA scholarship to Loughborough University in the UK to do my master's in analytical chemistry because I wanted to get some first world exposure. And so I entered that program. It was an intense 1-year program, no break. And you had to do the theory part first. And if you failed that, you couldn't continue the course. And I remember when I joined the program, it was like about 16 of us in that program. And most of us were from actually the Caribbean, along with persons from Canada and the US and the UK too. And there, you could see a segregation, the Caribbean people on one side and the first world people on the other side. And I think in their minds, they thought that we were pretty good at chemistry. But after the first exam, I came first. And everybody said, okay, whoa, Joy, can you help me to answer this question? And so the whole dynamics changed. And when I graduated, I got the highest score ever achieved in that course at the university. And then I was offered a scholarship to do my PhD in analytical chemistry. But I was so homesick, I said, no, I just need to go back home to Jamaica. So I went back, lectured again for a little bit, and then I wanted to get some industry experience. And so I was offered a job at Tia Maria Coffee Liqueur as a research chemist. I said, okay, good. I can do some research work and still, get some practical experience. However, unknown to me, it was just a one product operation. I have to multitask, do a lot of things, that I got so bored that they recognized that I was bored. So in the evening, they would send me to go and do public relations for the company. So chemistry in the morning, public relations in the evening. But then I was still bored. And so I would look across the fence, that's where J Wray Nephew is located, and I would see tankers rolling in, people looking busy, people looking happy. And I said, but that seems to be the happening place to work here. So I sent my resume over, just say, okay, just take a chance. And I was called for an interview. And when I went for the interview, they said, we just have to tell you up front, there are no openings here, but we're just so impressed with your resume that we wanted to talk with you. I said, okay, fine. So I spoke with them, went back over, quite dejected actually. And then a few weeks later, I got a call to say, guess what? We have created a special position for you, the position of chief chemist. And your job is to take the laboratory into the first world. Because interestingly enough, because Tia Maria was owned by URM at the time, we had a lot of first world technology here in the laboratory. So they wanted me to transfer that laboratory information back over to J Wray Nephew. And so I joined J Wray Nephew in 1981 as the chief chemist. And that's when my whole world changed. I thought that I would just be in the lab testing, getting bored again. And then I met the previous master blender, Owen Tulloch. And then that's when I realized that there was this amazing spirit rum that is so complex, intriguing, flavorful, and has so many aspects to it in terms of the production process, that I said, yes, here it is. I have now found my niche where I can apply my sensory skill and still use my chemistry.
There? Oh, you there? Okay, yeah, you cut out for a second for me at least. So what were your first sort of years like? Were people accepting of you? I assume you were as a woman in a very male-dominated environment in the early 1980s. Were there challenges with that?
Well, there were no challenges as the chemist, because
right.
They said, okay, she's there as a chemist. They know her chemistry background, and they knew that I was working alongside Owen. It's not until I was appointed a master blender in 1997 that, had some issues there, challenges.
A little pushback there. So
a little pushback on my bosses to say that we don't think a woman can become a blender.
Yeah.
And my bosses said, well, I'm telling you, she's the right person at the right time, and she's going to make us proud. And so, I really thank them for the support that they gave me, because a lot of the males in the organization really, really, really did not accept it at all.
Right. Yeah. It seems so long ago, that like ancient history, and this would have been the early 1980s, and now there's so many well-known women master blenders, and more coming, and and I think a lot of them credit you for sort of trailblazing that path.
Yes, I'm so happy I was able to create that pathway for other females, because a lot of them were actually physically doing the work, but nobody was brave enough to take them to the forefront and say, this is our master blender,
right.
A woman.
You're right. So, so in the early days, and again, this would have been 40 years ago, and sometimes we forget just how much the rum world has changed in the recent years. Tell us about the Appleton Estate Distillery when you joined, and how did it grow? Like how did the rum making ability change over your time there?
Well, there's so many changes since I've been there as it relates to actual Appleton Estate. We start with a simple story of getting to the Appleton Estate from Kingston, which was like almost a 5-hour journey.
Oh, wow.
We would have to get up from 3 a.m. in the morning. And thank God they built the highway. So we're able to cut down the time, and it now takes us like 2.5 hours to get there. But at that time, we had manual harvesting. So harvesting could only take place in the day. And I saw the transition into mechanical harvesting. And so we're able to do 24-hour harvesting, which made it more efficient for the sugar factory because we're able to supply the sugar factory with cane on a 24-hour basis. Then there was the upgrading of the stills at Appleton Estate. We moved from 2,000 gallon to 5,000 gallon pot stills, and we have 5,000 gallon pot stills, the largest pot still production in the Caribbean. And so then again, we're able to react to the increased demand for our rums because we're able to distill much more rums and we're able to produce more molasses because we're doing 24-hour harvesting. As it relates to J Wray Nephew, there have been so many changes there in our operations. The mechanization of our barrel handling. I remember when I went there that we had several warehouses on the compound, and you used to have a little tractor going put, taking the barrels, like about 20 barrels to the vatting warehouse. Then they would take it off manually, put, go back to another warehouse and take it off. We said, no, with the increase in production, we cannot continue like this. And so we automated all of our barrel handling and vatting operations, computerized the operations, still maintaining our craftsmanship. And so we were able to become much more efficient. Then the next problem we had, we're efficient on one side of the road, but we still had to be transporting the finished product, the bulk product, across the road via 2,000 gallon tankers. So we're having like 10 trips, 12 trips per day with this little tanker crossing what is a 4-lane road. And it was totally inefficient. And so we decided, learning from the Scotch, that we could build a pipeline connecting the vat from one side of the road, going under that 4-lane highway, and then carrying it to our main storage area on the other side of the road. And that improved our operations significantly. Then over the years, we, especially with the acquisition by Campari, were able to upgrade our bottling facilities, our blending facilities. We've also upgraded our waste treatment facilities. And so we had a zero discharge facility so there was no discharge of dunder to any part of the environment whatsoever. We concentrated the dunder and we used it as a fertilizer. So many changes since I've been
right. Right, and I imagine that the analytical tools have changed substantially over the years as well. And as a chemist, I assume what did you do on that front?
Well, be my pet peeve and my baby. I had to, whenever, there was CapEx going along, I'd raise my hand and say, this is a lab's CapEx. We want to have a GCMS. We want to have a HPLC. I created a research and development laboratory. We never had that before. So we have an R&D lab. And so we're able to analyze any aspects of the operation in our laboratory without having to send samples abroad. Right.
No, and that's fantastic. And I noticed I'm starting to see that more and more around the Caribbean. That every distillery started getting not only a lab, sometimes they have 3 labs for different aspects of production.
Yes, and what we did was, initially only Kingston had the GC, but now all the distilleries now have their own GC machine, so they can test right up front instead of waiting for Kingston to do the analysis.
Oh, for sure. I know that's got to be an enormous time saver.
It is.
Eliminating bottlenecks. So earlier you mentioned Owen Tulloch, and I have a few questions about him. So he was your predecessor. What was he like to work with? I mean, I think most of us are young enough that we don't remember, reading about him. So tell us about Owen.
Well, Owen, first of all, he had this little private room where he did his blending, so no one was allowed to go in there, and everyone feared him. I'm telling you. And I said, no, I have to go into that room to really see what's happening. And I said to them, there are only two answers to any question in life, yes or no. So one day I knocked on the door. He opened it, and I said, Mr. Tulloch, can I come in to really see what you're doing inside here? He said, sure. So I went in, and he started to show me all the various marks that we have, between the pot still and column still production, how they age. And he's saying, just remember, Joy, that what you're starting with, that's not what you're going to end up with. And different distill marks create completely different flavor profiles after 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years of aging. And I just want you to see the samples that I have, because it's going to take you quite some time to actually trace a distilled spirit right through for 25, 30 years. And I was so amazed with, the transformation of these various marks, and the fact that just by simply using sensory skill, because you remember Owen was not a chemist. And so he relied solely on his sensory expertise to put the blends together. And so I was able to combine my sensory skill with my chemistry background to be able to, as I say, combine art and science.
So did you, I'm just curious, were you taking some of his samples and going back and doing GCMS and looking and analyzing them, trying to understand the aging process better?
Sure. I used to take his samples and I would analyze it, and he would tell you that, this one vanilla note is extremely rich, extremely powerful, nutty, etc. And I go back and analyze it on the machine, and so said it is there. Till I became such an expert that when I blended something in the lab, I could tell them exactly how many esters there would be on the GC.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. And, and I think, a lot of us are sort of curious about the application of science to rum making, and a lot of us talk about rum marks and ester levels and things like that. And it's so much more complicated than just esters. But even if you factor in these other things like aldehydes and things like that, there's still no substitute for what you have, like your nose, your skill in that we're far better than any sort of equipment.
That's true. Nothing can replace the nose at this present time. They've had machines where they concentrate the aroma, and the GC analyze it, but still not as accurate as the nose, the human nose.
Oh, for sure. So when we were chatting beforehand, you mentioned that Owen had some special notebooks with old recipes or whatever. Can you tell us about those?
Well, he had all his blends because, excuse me, at that time it wasn't computerized. Mm-hmm. So he had all his blends he made his own notebook. So he got these sheets of papers that were lined up. So he could do like about 4 blends on one sheet. And then he would cut out pieces of cardboard boxes and string holes, punch some holes, string cords through them and tie them together. And that would be a book and it would tell you from this particular period to that particular period. And so he had all these books made out of cardboard.
And I assume you have them now, right?
Yes, they're in the archives.
They're in the archives.
Stored safely away.
Excellent. So I know there's certainly one rum blend in particular that a lot of tropical tiki cocktail people are very curious about, which is the famous Wray Nephew 17 that was used in the 1944 Mai Tai, and people have speculated about it, and I've uncovered a few things, and for example, we know it had to have been a entirely pot stilled rum because they didn't have column stills in Jamaica in 1944, but we still were curious, where was it distilled, what marks was it? So is it fair to say, do you happen to have that sort of information at hand if you wanted it?
Yes, I have that information from day one when I joined, when Owen took me under his wings, because it was known as Trader Vic's personal selection. That's how we had the rum in our inventory. So I knew everything about the rum, all the marks, all the special marks that we have at Appleton.
Okay, and I assume that and in that era, back in the 1940s, the Lindo brothers, the J Wray Nephew of the 40s and 50s, they owned multiple distilleries at the time, and they still do today. But it could have been several different distilleries. It wasn't just Appleton per se. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's not a fair statement.
Okay.
What people don't realize is how many different types of rums Appleton Estate used to make.
Oh yeah, no, plenty of different marks, and then no, there's some pictures on my website of some of the aging warehouses that J Wray Nephew had back in that era. So it's just an area of particular fascination with people like we want to recreate this rum, and hopefully someday J Wray Nephew will do something like this. So okay, so but back to Owen. I think you mentioned there were some funny stories. You pranked him a few times. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, there are funny times with Owen, because as I tell you, he was very serious. Mm-hmm. But I was able to break the ice with Owen. So I remember one day a big basket of goodies came on his desk. Had lots of chocolates and cookies in it. And he had it on the desk there for like about 3 weeks. So one day I said to him, aren't you going to open this basket for the goodies? And he says, I don't know. So every morning, because I used to reach work before him, I would slit a hole in the basket. Then I would take out a chocolate, go back over to my lab. I would eat, enjoy. Then the next morning I go for another, and it kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. But I didn't trouble the part that was facing him, because I took everything from the back. So one day I said to him, have you not turned that basket around to see that things are missing from the basket? I said, well, I must tell you, the chocolates and the cookies, they were delicious. And he said, something, Joy, you're really a brave woman,
And I think there was another story involved you in a birthday celebration or something like that. You share that one?
Yes. Well, that didn't involve Owen.
Okay.
But normally for birthday celebrations in the past, everybody would get splashed with a little bit of rum. Just like how people used to, powder with flour, we powdered with rum. And so it was my birthday now, and they're all waiting for me at the doorway because there's only one entrance and exit to my office. And so everybody was waiting outside now to splash me with rum on my birthday. And my secretary came to me and she said, Joy, they're out for you today. They're going to come and splash you with rum. I said, really? No. I said, Carol, hold my handbag because I'm going to climb through the window. So I climbed through the window. She handed me my handbag. I darted to my car. And then as I was driving out, I tooted the horn and waved to them waiting at the door. And they were all waiting with the glasses in their hands.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other stories from Owen you can share, like going to his house or anything like that?
Yeah, Owen used to love to have parties. And so we used to go to a lot of parties at Owen because he was, it was strange. He was very serious at work, but outside of work, he used to entertain a lot. And, you go to his home for dinner, cocktails, etc. So there are two sides of the man, serious, and then one that is a good party fun person. And so we had good times.
Good.
And you know what was always very funny? When we went to a party, because he was a teetotaler, Mm-hmm. So he would take a glass of rum, and that glass would last him for the entire night. People thought that he finished and he was changing to another one. But that glass, he would just take a sip, then he'd walk around the room, and then he'd come back around. And then people thought that, he finished his glass and he's changing. One glass lasted him for the entire night.
Yeah. And it's important. You need to enjoy your rum over time, not just keep filling the glass. So 1997, you become the first female master blender in the world, I suppose. What was that like, and how did Owen help that transition for you?
Well, Owen was the one who recommended me, and when I was appointed in 1997, actually it was our PR agent in the UK who contacted us and said, "Do you realize that there's no other female as a master blender in the spirit industry, not just rum?" We said, really? Whoa. I said, this is quite an achievement for a Caribbean woman. But of course, it was still contained in the island because we didn't do a lot of traveling then like what is happening now with the master blenders. You would just stay in your little room, make your blends, and then it's exported, and that's it. You'll get your accolades, your medals, but you really didn't travel. And so it was when I made my breakthrough with Canada, going to Canada on my first trip. after becoming master blender, that a whole PR machinery came into place. I was on national TV in Canada. I was having interviews with the media. I'll never forget with Toronto Sun, the headline was "The Nose Knows," and everybody started to laugh. The nose knows. And they had a story about me. And so I started now to tour Canada a lot, from East Coast to West Coast, several trips to Canada. And that was how we're able to grow Appleton Estate, by doing so many promotions in Canada, where it actually is now our number one market.
Right. Oh, no, for sure. And then I remember there was apparently like a fairly early trip to London as well, in going to Trailer Happiness.
Yes. We made an early trip to London. And then, of course, now, I understood that Angostura was presenting before me. Because they just told me that, oh, Joy, they just want to do a little tasting. It's all right, fine, no problem. So when I went and I looked downstairs, there was George. The only thing left for him to have down there was a still. He had so many moving parts down there. I said to my team, I said, look here, you better get some tasting mats printed, because I'm not going to go down there, with my dry two hands after that presentation from Angostura. Anyway, so I went down and I did my presentation, but I started from the sugar cane, going right through the entire process to the end. And then George came to me at the end and he says, Joy, I told them not to send me.
Right. Yes. Well, we will have a teaser. We're gonna have John on in a month or so, and so I'll ask him to tell his version of that story as well. So you mentioned Canada and in England. Where were some of the more exotic places you traveled?
Oh my goodness, New Zealand, one of my favorite places, and what was a memorable occasion for me in New Zealand is that we actually took a helicopter, landed on a glacier, and then drank Appleton Estate with the glacial ice. I can never, ever forget that experience. It was just absolutely amazing. For the US, I actually was the guest of the head of presidential catering at the White House. And that experience, going to the White House, the security, everything was amazing. And it was so touching that he actually gave me his medal. When I was leaving, he says, Joy, I have my special medal and I'm going to give it to you because I was, so fascinated with your work. And I actually did a tasting with them and actually showed them how we could, also cook with rum. And I made a special glaze and I brought up my guava jelly along with some other Jamaican ingredients. I made a nice glaze for bread pudding there. Oh. Then going to Singapore, Europe. I mean, so many different experiences all over the world. It's just absolutely, just so many countries, right. Promoting and spreading rum. It's just totally fascinating.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, how did you have time to blend rum if you were traveling all over the world?
Well, when you have a good team left behind, you don't have to worry because your formulas are fixed. So everybody just to make sure that they follow the formula.
There you go. There you go. I want to come back to two topics and sort of join them together. So the Wray Nephew 17 and circa 2006, there's a story of the few bottles of Wray Nephew 17 going to London in circa 2006. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, the London office said they want if I had any special rum, and I said yes, I have quite a bit of a very special rum, and because they wanted to give persons who were good ambassadors in the UK a bottle. So I just took some from one of the barrels. It had a warehouse label on it, so it wasn't specially labeled. It just showed warehouse number what, Trader Vic personal selection, etc. And it went. And then this thing created such a stir that I saw people now making the most expensive cocktail in the world with this rum. And I was just totally blown away. How this rum was so revered by everyone, especially the bartender scene.
Right. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, though, it was not exactly the rum that Trader Vic would have used, right?
No, it's the exact rum. We had, because we had it in a barrel.
But it was
when they discontinued, because
right.
we were still going ahead and putting down rum.
Right.
And then when they discontinued, so we still had that rum left behind that we could blend together.
But it was cask strength, though, if I remember correctly.
It was cask strength, yes.
Cask strength, yeah. So people drinking that would have had a different experience than if they had drank it from a J Wray Nephew bottle of that era.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So now switch gears a little bit here. So in 1988, and in 2008, you were on the Jamaican Rum Standard Committee, and later you chaired the technical portion of the Jamaican GI process. What was that like? Sort of like walk us through that.
Oh my goodness, that GI process was so long because it took us like almost 7 years to actually reach to the point where we got an official GI, because we had the Swiss intellectual property working with us. So they would be visiting Jamaica sometimes 3 times. Then we had to go to France to actually look at, how they handle intellectual property and GIs. And so it was a whole going back and forth. I learned a lot from the Swiss intellectual property. Mm-hmm. And eventually in 2016, we're actually issued a geographical indicator for Jamaica rum.
Right. And but the GI was in large part based on, if I understand correctly, the Jamaican rum standards.
We use some parts of the Jamaica rum standard to contribute towards the GI, but we look at other aspects too.
Yeah. So for the people who don't live and breathe this, what is the difference between the Jamaican rum standard and then what the Jamaican GI is?
Well, for example, the Jamaica Rum Standard did not include our limestone filtered water, for example. It did not include the fact that it must be fermented and distilled in Jamaica. The Rum Standard did have no sugar added, no additives, and that was incorporated in the GI. And so, and the Rum Standard did not refer to minimum aging in the way we wanted to have it in the GI, where, we said once it's minimum age, then you must have that as age declaration on the label. Yeah. But it was important to note that we had 2 standards for rum when we did the Jamaica Rum Standard, for traditional rum and for flavored rums. And in that flavored rum category, you could add anything that you wanted. You could add sugar, you could add your flavors, but we wanted to have a line of demarcation between the 2.
Right. Right. And if I remember correctly, the Jamaican rum standard became sort of a reference for the Caribbean rum standard. Is that?
That's true. That's true. It became a reference for the CARICOM standard.
Okay. So during your time as master blender, you've created many new expressions, as well as having to carry on existing expressions that were there, existed before you became the master blender. Could you tell us about some of the expressions that you're particularly proud of, or that you changed in a substantial way?
Well, I think you could start with the first one that I made as master blender, which was to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Appleton Estate. So it was known as the 250th anniversary blend. And this did not have an age statement, but it was a very unique combination of pot and column still rums, and it was a limited time offering. But it was so well received that they decided to commercialize this, and this is how Appleton Estate Reserve came to life. Then there is the 30-year-old blend that I did because we wanted to have a rum older than 21 in our range, and I created a 30-year-old. Then importantly, Campari asked me to create a special blend to celebrate, at the time, my 20 years as master blender and 35 years in the industry. And so that was how Appleton Estate Joy Anniversary Blend was created. And I got the chance to use my very special 35-year-old pot still rum to become the heart and soul of that particular blend. I was involved in the whole packaging, the color selection, the shape of the bottle. And again, that was a limited time offering. And what was so touching about this particular blend is that the workers in production, when they knew that that blend was going to be bottled, they started saving towards it to purchase that in my honor. And it was very touching.
Wow. Yeah. So there were some other expressions I think that you had mentioned had sort of went away and then came back, like say Appleton 12, for example. Can you share anything about those?
Yes, Appleton 12 went through so many changes. So it started out as Appleton 12. Then we didn't have enough stock, so we had to remove the age statement. And so it became just, we just call it Appleton Estate Extra. And then when we started building up back stocks, because we knew we wanted to have a minimum 12-year-old rum. And so when that happened, now I recreated the 12-year-old, which today is known as the Appleton Estate 12-year-old rare cask.
Okay. And can you share anything about the new Appleton 15? Like, what was your thinking on making that one?
Well, the Appleton Estate 15 was actually originally released as a limited edition for Canada because we wanted to create this special blend for Canada just to celebrate, the success that we have had there and how the Canadians have been so loyal to our rum. And so we did a limited time release for 15-year-old. But it was so well received that our global strategic marketing team decided that it will now become a permanent part of our range. And this year, we have now released it as a permanent part of our range.
And it's the blend is essentially the same as when you first released in Canada?
Same blend as what we released in Canada.
Okay. And last blend. Any good stories about Appleton 50? Like, I know a lot of us are never tried that. Would love to know more about Appleton 50. What was that like?
So when Owen left, the 50 was being aged, and he said to me, "Joy, I now leave these barrels in your hand. One, to make sure you don't have any excessive evaporation loss, and two, to make sure you process it properly, that you'll have a beautifully finished product." So I didn't really want to get into any trouble because everybody in the company referred to that rum as the lose the work rum. So you know that if you lost any of that rum, you'll be going straight through the door. So at the time, the person who was in charge of our barrel inventory and warehouse management, he was a former major in the army. So I said to him, "Major, look here, you see those barrels there aging? If anything happens to it, I am not the only one going through the gate. You're going through with me." So what he did was he actually chained the barrels to the floor of the warehouse. And he called me one day and he said, "Joy, come over and look. There's no way nobody can move these barrels and nothing can happen to them." Right. So we chained them. We made sure to refill exactly every 3 years until it was time for bottling. And so we started with 26 barrels and we ended up with 13 barrels. When it was time for bottling.
Okay. So I guess assume consolidated over time?
Yeah, we consolidated over time.
Okay, excellent. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think me and a few other people would love to believe that maybe there's some even longer aged rum, maybe for another release in the future. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but we're hoping for that. So
one day, yes.
So in recent years, very recently actually, people, rum enthusiasts have started to get a hold of, be able to finally purchase these very high ester Jamaican rums, like the Hampton Estate DOK, the Long Pond TECC. Are these something that you go home and enjoy? Like, what are your thoughts on these high ester Jamaican rums?
These high ester Jamaican rums have their little niche, and to be enjoyed in a certain particular way. But if I'm sitting out in my garden, playing with the doctor birds and watching that beautiful Jamaican sunset, I'm going to sit back and just have a glass of Appleton Estate neat, because that's something that I can drink for a long time.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So you have access, like probably unparalleled access to all sorts of interesting high ester weird rums, but you're saying those have a special purpose. They're not necessarily exactly. Okay. So in 2012, Campari purchased J Wray Nephew. How did the business change? Like how did it go? When what happened afterwards?
Well, Campari has made so many changes, not just from a production point of view in terms of equipment upgrade, but also from the human resources aspect. They have so many programs in place for employees, and I have seen that, the transformation, even a little coat of paint, that we needed to get, the polishing of our stills at Appleton Estate, that was really a sore point for me, because I really kept begging. I said, look, from the previous owners, can you just polish the stills? I mean, everywhere else I go in the world, stills are shiny and pretty, and we have a tour going on here. And then Campari said, we're going to revamp that entire rum experience, and in that process we're going to actually polish those stills because we have visitors passing through. But I must say that so many things have been done for our employees. We have so many programs, and they're always thinking. We have an ambassador program, so they're always thinking of new ways, to get the staff interested to do things that are outside the norm. For example, right now we have a talent competition going on every night, and where employees come and they put a video, give all their skills. Some might be an artist, some a piano player, some a DJ, and then each week we select a winner to go towards the finals. So we have things like that, just inspiring our employees. And of course, we have an excellent reward and recognition program going on. And so it was a combination of both technological improvement and human resource improvement.
Okay. So I can imagine, like Owen, someday he would like to retire. As much as I can imagine why you would want to retire when there's all that rum to be enjoyed. Someday you may retire, and it seems like David Morrison, who was a previous guest here on our Rum Talk series, is sort of poised to take over that role at some point. Tell us how he came to that role and your part in that.
Well, one of the trips that was scheduled for me to go to Canada, I could not go. And so, we have a group of people that could possibly be a substitute at the time. And they asked me who I thought the best person was at the time. And I said, well, I think that David is the best person because, he had, the knowledge of the whole entire process. And so, he'd be able to answer questions if asked, because it's a whole different ball game now when you're traveling internationally, because you're being asked very technical questions as a master blender. And this is why a master blender is now, traveling so much more, because you have technical questions to answer. And so I selected David for that particular trip.
Okay. And so was there some sort of a competition, or like how did it come about that where you chose somebody to sort of take on that role?
Well, Canada just asked, at the time the marketing team asked me, who you thought was the best person to go on this trip in your place. And I told them, when I looked at everybody, I said, hey, David.
Right. So I understand that there's an unusual rule about that you and David cannot travel together or be in the same place at the same time. Can you tell us about that?
Well, very recently, Campari implemented that, persons in a similar operation should really not travel together. So like when we're going to Milan, for example, for a convention, different persons take different planes. And when that came about, I remembered when I was working at Tia Maria with Dr. John Marks, he's very strict on that. So we'll be going just down to Ocho Rios for a convention, and myself and the chemist could not travel in the same vehicle. And I am saying, well, this is so stupid. And then he said, remember the story about Manchester United? I said, okay, right? Where they all died in the plane crash. So I said, okay, I understand. But Campari has a rule now where certain people would not be on the same flight.
Okay, so continuity of operations.
Yes.
So wrapping up, final question here, and then if people have questions, now is your time to get them in there. So while you talk here, so where do you see Caribbean rum headed over the next 5 or 10 years? Like we've certainly seen drastic, improvements and new expressions in the last 5 years. Where do you think Caribbean rum goes from here?
Well, there is such a wonderful potential for Caribbean rum in the next 5 years, because it is these limited edition premium aged rums that is enticing the market, getting everybody excited about what premium aged rum is all about. And we've had wonderful releases from all the Caribbean producers in their limited editions, and this is what we're doing at Appleton Estate. We have an excellent pipeline for new products over a period of time, where we want to use that to help to elevate the existing expressions that we have in the range. And you're finding that more and more young professionals are now gravitating towards premium aged rum, and people are trading up to premium aged rum. They're no longer interested in quantity, but they're now interested in quality. And this is what is going to take Caribbean rum to the pinnacle.
Yeah. Do you think there's room for Caribbean rum to take away or from other spirit categories, grow into the other spirit categories and be perceived as just as good?
I'm sure in 5 years' time, people are going to appreciate Caribbean rum in the same way they appreciate a good Scotch or a bourbon or a cognac.
Good. Excellent. I agree. And this is why I do this, because I love, like you, I love rum as well, and telling its story and getting it out there and educating people is why I do this. So, yes. Surprisingly, we don't have any questions here. So, do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Well, I'd just like to say to my fellow Caribbean producers, keep doing what you're doing, guys. The world is our oyster, and very soon we'll be knocking on the door of whiskey.
I like that. And so again, I will say thank you for being on with this. This is certainly one of the things that you are one of the people that we very definitely wanted to have on as part of our Icon series, because you are a true icon of Caribbean rum and one of the people who are help bringing more people into the fold. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, take us out.
All right. Yeah. Great session as always. Just want to echo what Matt said. Thank you so much, Joy, for joining us. I know there's so many comments from people who love hearing from you and your passion for rum and everything you've done for it. So the Icon series certainly wouldn't have been complete without you, I think. But Matt, do you want to say anything about maybe who is coming up next?
Right. So coming up in 2 weeks or so, we have Anthony Bento from Antigua Distillers in English Harbor. And then after that, we have John Georges will be in mid-November. John Georges of Angostura. And I just love talking with John. He has such a beautiful voice. So I'm looking forward to both of those. So stay tuned. We'll have the invites out there soon.
Absolutely. And I just put a little link underneath the video if you're attending right now that goes to the page to register for the session with Anthony Bento. So go ahead and do that so you don't miss it. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Matt. Thanks to WIRSPA. And we will see you again very soon.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.